I want to do in this lesson is show something that I hadn't thought about talking about, but I ran into an issue with my own code, so I want to show this lesson. And what I want to do here is make sure that you and I understand how option and try values and either values work inside of for expressions. And by that I mean both the success case and the failure case. And to do this, I want to tell a little bit of story about myself. So I was recording the delete video early on a Monday morning. And you know, Monday mornings are bad for coding and they're bad for the brain. So they're also bad for my brain, as it turns out. So this is the code I was showing in the book for the delete function. And as I was going through that in my mind in the last video, I was like, well, I really don't like this code. And the thing I didn't like was, you know, I have the for expression here, which is just fine. But then inside the for expression, I'm using select all, and select all, because I'm using try values, this can throw a failure right there. So there's a potential to get a failure here. That this code should be fine. It should never throw any sort of failure. This code is just subtraction, so it should never have a problem, this line right here. And then this code here could throw a failure. So what I had in my mind was that I'm calculating number of rows deleted, and then I'm thinking, well, Al, that doesn't make any sense because you're calculating that. And then if this throws a failure right here, num rows deleted is going to be wrong because you're calculating it, and then this fails. And if you understand for expressions, you know that my thinking was wrong, because what happens is if this fails, it's going to throw a failure, and then this code down here will never be reached. So if you fully understand that right now, you don't even have to watch the rest of this video, because that's what the rest of this video is about, is my wrong thinking in regards to calculating this number, and then this number being wrong when this returns a failure. But if you don't understand the problem, then I would suggest please do watch the rest of the video, because that's what this is about. And it's about handling success and failure over on this right side when you're working with types like option and try. And before I get into that, let me show you that what I did was, in the previous video, I started to rewrite that code like this. And I did not share this code in that video, but what I changed it to, again, this was all early on a Monday morning, was this code can throw an exception, this can't throw an exception, and then this code could throw an exception, this code could throw an exception. And I felt pretty happy about that because I got all the exception throwing code out of the way early, and then I calculate number of rows deleted. So by the time I got to this point, I was pretty confident. If I'm calculating number of rows deleted right here, you can be darn sure that's accurate, and I felt much more comfortable about that. And indeed, this new algorithm may be better than the original one. But the reason I got into this one is because of my misunderstanding on the Monday morning of how things work over here on the right side. And the reason I say this might be more accurate is because it's going to be a little bit slower, but what I do is I get select all here to get rows 1 and select all here to get rows 2. And now you're really sure of exactly what's in that file with rows 1 and rows 2. So you can be really confident in number of rows deleted. So I won't argue that this algorithm may be better than this one anyway. But the reason I got into writing this algorithm was my wrong thinking. So let me change the setup here a little bit, and then I can make it more clear how things work over here and why my thinking was so wrong. And to simplify the problem and to show where my thinking was wrong, I created this example. So this is something we did earlier in the course. And if you remember, this used to be make int over here, and then I would pass in a 1, and then I showed how that is very similar to having a sum of 1 over here. So if I press save, you'll see what's going on here. And actually, let me improve this output a little bit and just say at the end of this, maybe int equals $ maybe int. I think that'll be a little bit more clear as we go through this. And now when you come over here, we can see that output right here. So it says maybe int is a sum of 6. And that's a sum of 6 because all of this code is working. You can think of these here as all being option values. And then of course a sum is the success case and an option value. And then a none is the failure case. And this is what I want to get into showing here. The first thing I'm going to show is that this won't work. Let me go ahead and save that. And you'll see a crazy error message over here, and it says I found this I of nothing over here, and I require something else. So who knows what that's trying to say, but what I could tell you is that you can't actually do none like this. When you want to create a none value that is of the integer type, because I'm working with integers here, and here, you can't just do a none because that doesn't have any type associated. with it, what you have to do is an option and say, well, I want an empty option and its type is going to be int. So that's actually the way you would correctly create a none value right there. So let me save that. And now we see maybe int is a none down here. So again, that is coming from right here. And now what I want to do is say, well, that's a little distracting to read that up there. So I want to create a value here. And let's just say that's a none. And we can actually say that's a none of int like that. And now, just doing one step at a time, I'll put that there and save that, and we'll get the same result over here again, right there. And now what I want to show is how this is short-circuiting. So at this point, it may not be obvious that the code is stopping right here. What happens is the for expression hits this none right here, and it actually stops. It never even comes to this yield. It just stops right here, and the none is assigned to maybe int, and that's what's printed out, and we see that output here. But I want to be really clear about this and show that this short-circuiting is happening, and there's a way we can do this, and this is kind of a fun and interesting way of debugging code inside of for expressions. So what I'm going to do here is say, I want to do a little print line right there, and let's just call this step 1 like that. And now if you remember the whole block of code thing from earlier in our discussions, this is a block of code, and remember that the value of a block of code is the value of its last expression. So the value of the last expression here is this none of int, which is up here. So this little trick here of using this block of code inside of a for expression lets me debug what's going on inside here. So I can print that this is step 1 and then return a none of int. And let me go ahead and save that now. So now this is a little bit better. You can see step 1 and then we get to the end down here. And now what I want to do is fill everything else out here exactly the same way. So bear with me a few moments while I add a bunch of curly braces to the code, and I'll be right back. Okay, so very quickly what I did was I created these 3 blocks of code to assign I, J, and K. So this is the I block right here, and as you can see I print step 1. I changed this back to a sum 1 just for right now, and then I did the same thing for step 2 and then step 3. And then I even added this print line statement to the yield area. And then if we come over here, because these are all sum values, now you can see that it prints step 1, step 2, step 3 in the yield area, and then it prints that end statement down here. So in this example, these are all success cases or success values. And I referred to this earlier in this video series as being the happy path, because all of these are success cases. We get this happy path, and then execution comes down here. And the entire for yield block works. So that's kind of what I mean by the happy path. And now if I replace this one right here with a none int, the question at this point is, what do you think will be printed out over here? And I want to pause just for a moment to let you think about that. So again, I have a none here, and I have all these print statements, including this one in the yield area, and then this one at the end. So when I press save, what do you think is going to be printed over there? And I'll give you just a couple seconds to think about that, or you can pause this video. And now I'll go ahead and press save, and we'll take a look at that. And that's cool. This is exactly what I'm trying to show in this video, is that step 1 is printed right here, and then it hits the none value, and then the for expression is essentially short-circuited or aborted at this point. So it hits right here. This print statement is never printed. This one is never printed. And this one in the yield area, if you notice, is never printed. The code never even comes here. It just comes right out of here. It says, whoops, there's a none. That's the end of our work inside of this for expression. And now we're going to come out of the for expression, and the none is going to be assigned to maybe int. Everything else is skipped, and then we get this print statement down here. And if you look at the output over here, you'll see that's exactly what happens. So that's the main point I'm trying to show in this lesson, is that as soon as the none is hit, the code is short-circuited, and we can actually see another fun one is to make that a sum again, and now we put the none here, and again you'll see that this works, and then when the none is hit right here, it'll be short-circuited. So indeed we see step 1, step 2, so we get step 1, step 2, the none is hit, so this is never printed, this is never printed, and then the none is assigned to maybe int up here, and then the print statement happens down here, and that's exactly what happens over here. And that's the whole purpose of this video, is to show that if and when a none value is hit over here, execution of this for expression just completely comes to a halt right there. It just stops, and then that none value is assigned to your variable over here, and then the code moves on past the for expression. And now you can understand why my thinking was so wrong, because here select all could fail, of course. This one will succeed. Num rows deleted should always succeed. And as I mentioned, my concern was that this would fail and then num rows deleted would be wrong. But of course my Monday morning thinking was wrong, because as soon as this fails, here I'm using try instead of option, but as soon as this fails, the rest of the for expression is not executed, and specifically this yield area is not executed. So num rows deleted is going to have nothing to do with this value right here. It's just going to be equal to what's thrown out of here, and what's thrown out of here is a failure. Because I'm using try, this will be a failure instead of a none value that I showed in my previous example over here. So over here I was working with option, and then I was throwing nones out of here. And then in this example over here, because we're using try, write to file will return a failure value, and then this will be equal to the failure value. This value over here doesn't matter what I calculated. So that's where my Monday morning thinking was wrong, was I was so concerned about this number being calculated, and it didn't even matter because this was just going to be a failure when that happened. So as a little summary, I'll just come back over here and show this code over here. So again, if you want to take a look at this code, this whole part, especially right here, is the sole purpose of this lesson, is to be crystal clear that when you get a none value over here, or you get a failure value over here, execution of the for expression stops. And then in this case, the none value is assigned to the variable here. And in this case, the failure value is what's assigned to this variable over here. And in my example over here, num rows deleted just didn't matter because this was going to be a failure.